Um, anyway, so it's a pretty important subject, this. The drive to improve our towns and cities, to green them, is very current. Um, for me, there was a bit of an eye-opener in 1995 with what was a humorous bit of research by two Russian dissident artists called Vitaly Komar and Alex Malamed. And they tried to establish an answer to the question, what would be the world's most wanted painting? And the results were reported in New Scientist. And in general, it was a landscape painting. This is cross cultures, a landscape painting with a few animals, some people, open space in the foreground, trees in the background, and distant views of water and wooded hills. And it was pointed out that this is a sort of Repton-esque landscape, the sort of landscape that the landscape architect Humphrey Repton used to design. So is there something deep in the human psyche that drives us to seek out this sort of environment? People coined the term biophilia hypothesis, and then latterly nature deficit disorder, which we all suffer if we are subject to hard surface concrete surrounds. And what's the latest in the English National Planning Policy Framework? There's a requirement for streets to be tree-lined, a biodiversity net gain policy, which has been postponed yet again. And people are talking about the 330-300 aspiration. I can't remember what that is. So if anybody can, put that in the chat. Is it 3 trees, 30 visible from one's house, 30% urban tree canopy cover, and 300, I can't remember what the 300 is. So there's going to be some really knowledgeable people in this event. Do enlighten us as to what the 330-300 aspiration is. Anyway, there we go. That's far too much from me. I'm glad so many people are here. The real purpose of these events is to bridge research and practice. Too much practitioners operate without the benefit of the insights that are obtained by academics, and too often academics have to pursue their careers in isolation from the practical needs that are faced by practitioners on a daily basis. So help us bridge that gap. Listen to Agnieszka's presentation. Think of questions that you'd like to ask her, put them in chat, and then after she's given her presentation, which will be about 30 minutes, we can have a question and answer session at the end, and all go away enlightened and enthused. So without further delay, let me invite Agnieszka to take the stand. Not that it's a stand, we're all on Zoom.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. Welcome, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today. It's a great audience, and thank you very much, Urban Design Group, for this lovely invitation to this lovely event. And this will be first time I'm meeting Urban Design Group, and first time I have opportunity to speak about my book that was recently published and everything that's behind the book. So I'm very happy to be here, and I hope my presentation will be valuable for you, maybe inspire some new activity in your design practice, because in the end, this is a book for you, for the designers, urban planners, architects, landscape architects, and everyone interested in making our living spaces, our everyday urban landscapes more healthy and more powerful in promoting mental health and well-being. So I will share my screen. Let's see if it works. And let's start. So I was thinking what I can talk about my book. Is my screen visible for everyone? It's
It
okay?
is, yes.
Okay, perfect. And you know what I can say, if everything is already in the book. I actually wrote that book in order to consolidate the years of research and everything I know from other researchers to in a comprehensive way to transmit it to designers and people that are practicing landscape architecture, urbanism, as well as the decision makers, to not have to say it anymore. But here I am. I have to share a few words about the research behind it and the book. And I thought I will just share several reflections and what led me to this topic and why I think it's important. I will also walk you through the structure of the book a little bit, but most importantly, I would like to hear from you, hear questions, maybe some critique from people who already read it, and just general feedback. I would be very happy to hear from you. The book Neuroscience for Designing Green Spaces, Contemplative Landscapes has been published in May this year. So quite recently. I'll have to put it next slide. Okay. And starting off what the contemplative landscapes are, because this is the concept that I came up with because I just had to name somehow the healthy healing landscapes that were crystallizing along my research. So I bet every one of us can imagine some sort of beautiful natural landscape which induced in us a certain strong emotional response, maybe the awe, maybe the experience of sublime, maybe some deep relaxation or reorientation of attention from our daily stresses and problems to something different, something else, something beyond. Maybe these landscapes made us more creative or inspired some projects, some new ideas in our heads. So I'm sure all of us can imagine what these landscapes could be. This could be, as in this slide, the trail towards the crater of volcano, but it can be something else. And the question is whether they all have to be in some open wild and whether we can replicate these the feelings that they induce in us in our cities, in our everyday lives, especially those that are important for urban populations, for people that are subject to urban stress, so-called, and risks coming from urbanicity, risks of mental health disorders coming from urbanicity, which I will talk about in a little bit. So if we think about landscape contemplation, it is actually an activity or passive activity, if you will, because it doesn't really require any activity rather than just passively being exposed to the landscape, to the scenery. And it works as a portal between the outer and the inner space. So through that space, through this composition of different elements in a certain way, there is a sort of influence in our inner neural network and our body, our mind. So this can also bring multiple benefits. And I believed at the beginning of my research that there are some certain ways that the landscapes manifests itself to us. There are the certain components and features in each landscape that can unlock this potential and trigger in ourselves a specific response that could be desirable from the standpoint of our urban lifestyle. And they can help with different sorts of problems, depending on what we name a problem. In my research, though, while I was looking for these components and those features of landscapes, I didn't want to refer to books, to essays, which there was a lot of essays appreciating nature and romanticizing landscapes and so on. I didn't want to refer to trends and styles in architecture and design, or even senior famous architects. I wanted to ask people, but not even in the most traditional survey way, but I wanted to ask their brains and drive some conclusions from that, which I believe it makes it the evidence-based design can inform the evidence-based design. And the problems with our urban environment that we could see today there are many problems actually, and a lot is wrong in our urban spaces. They were definitely not designed and built for mental health and well-being of their residents. Not just that they are placed on the completely modified, eradicated natural ecosystems, but they are full of different sorts of pollution and static dynamic elements that are artificial. Of course, we need them to function, but they are not placed there with consideration to the mental health and well-being. The elements of the city are very dense, packed in complex infrastructures with a lot of forms, colors, textures that are mostly abstract. Here on this slide, you can see the artistic vision from Keiichi Matsuda from his movie Hyperreality of the Medellin, Colombia city in few years from now, where the infrastructures of existing physical environment is amplified with the virtual and augmented reality elements overlapped on top of them. This level of overload of information is kind of possible and likely to be happening soon in our cities. But yeah, it's still a song of the future. So, but for now, we are already experiencing the sensory overstimulation in our cities and so-called urban stress. There is lots of research about it, on which I also elaborate in my book. A lot of this kind of imbalances and disconnection from nature, the cognitive and mental fatigue that we experience, but we might not always be aware of this on the daily basis. In the longer run, in the perspective of years and decades, they can create all sorts of mental health issues and diseases, illness. And in fact, the studies show that it is already a scientific consensus that the urbanicity comes with 40% higher risk of developing mental health disorders as compared to the rural living. And this is the study of, this is findings of meta-analysis, which I, as a reminder, meta-analysis is where they take together a lot of studies replicated in different time points in different parts of the world by different research teams, and they conclude the findings and they sum up the findings to establish so-called scientific consensus. So you can see here some studies were also from Great Britain that contribute to this consensus. And it was in 2010. I believe the situation didn't improve since then, And I'm guessing it only deteriorated a little bit over the last couple of years. So this is it. Something has not worked with how our urban spaces are designed, and there is a lot to do, and there's actually a lot that we can do as urban planners, landscape architects, and architects to help these problems. Fortunately, the state of research is developing now in these areas, and we can see growing number of publications in urban health, the scientific publications. And when the scientific publications are, I experienced that after sometimes the scientific publications are there are also designer books and publications more directed at designer audiences from that. So it's a question of a couple of years. And my book is basically that. It summarizes 10 years of research of myself and my team, but also other researchers around the world, and brings it all in this one book in a more approachable form, more designer oriented. So what we can do, so basically, as I said, there's quite a lot responsibility in the designer's hands and decision makers' hands. It is estimated by environmental psychology that about 10% of health and well-being overall is moderated by the physical environment that surrounds us. So we can now discuss whether 10% is not so much or it's a lot, but it's always something that can make someone feel better. And it seems that the solution to all the issues that are dwelling the urban spaces as they are designed could be in nature, but we haven't really known what kind of nature and what constitutes the nature and what are these elements of nature that we want in our urban spaces, want to form and create in our urban spaces, because we wouldn't want them to be just random designs if there is already evidence that not all green spaces work in the same way. Not all landscapes work in the same way. So this is the basis and background of my studies, and I was trying to develop the set of rules and break down the spatial features of scenes and landscapes to bring out those factors and those aspects that have the largest potential to influence our perception, our brain activity, and then in turn our general mental health and well-being in the longer run. And I was actually, as I learned during the process, I wasn't the first one with these claims, because already in 19th century, this gentleman, Frederick Law Olmsted, believed that the natural scenery has a potential for healing. And he always underlined that the natural scenery can influence our systems more than any single form of medication to establish sound minds in sound bodies. And also he always underlined that he's not even exaggerating, and it's not a hyperbole at all. And however, he did not have the scientific tools. They didn't know neuroscience at that time. And his claims about that were largely neglected by the peers. So he's mostly known for his designs of great public urban parks that, by the way, are quite contemplative, as we, even till today, they are quite contemplative. And yeah, it was a great inspiration for me. as well, and too bad he was way ahead of his times. So what are these active ingredients of the scenes, and what are these specific powerful components of landscapes that we can take and replicate in our design? So basically the book is all about that. These active ingredients I called contemplative landscape features, and these highly contemplative, highly those landscapes with healing potential, I coined contemplative landscapes. And through my research, I came up with this chart. This is a summary of all the research and testing. The chart called Contemplative Landscape Model, which is all about weighing these 7 key categories, which are layers of the landscape, landform, biodiversity, color and light, compatibility, archetypal elements, and last but not least, character of peace and silence. Each of these categories can exist in this landscape setting in different strengths, which is measured from in points from 1 to 6. Interestingly, most of our urban parks and gardens, as it comes from studying experts' evaluation, falls somewhere between 3 and 4 points in that scale. And the healing potential, as per the neuroscience studies, starts from about 4.6 points in that scale. So it looks like on average, the average urban parks and average green spaces in the city, because we can also talk about the line of trees along the street or any other urban greening intervention or site. There is still a lot to do about them in our cities to make the most of the perception, the landscapes that we can perceive every day. Also, through the research and testing of all these categories, I managed to add the weight to each of them. It seems that the layers of the landscape, archetypal elements, and character of peace and silence are the most important of all to be present in our landscapes that we create, but also the most powerfully impacting the brain. But other ones, of course, are very important, and they are necessary to also consider for creating the most contemplative spaces. But sometimes it's not possible in some contexts to include very long distance views that the layers of the landscape category talks about. In small spaces, there we should prioritize some other aspects. So let's talk a little bit about the brain and behavior research behind the book that I try to introduce in the first part of the book. But the book is not a scientific book. It's a book that summarizes the findings from that neuroscience research and translated to practice of design. So what mainly was the purpose of the research was trying to compare different sorts of settings, include the natural elements. So this could be parks, gardens, but also residential areas with greenery, or streets, or even street settings with just a little bit of sky visible there, so that it's also part of natural environment, and seeing how these aspects are influencing the brainwave of people, and seeing if indeed, after isolating everything else from the picture, there are some significant differences in the brain response to these landscapes. It turns out there are significant differences between highly contemplative landscapes, as per the chart I have just showed, and those that are not so highly contemplative or just average, or just completely fall outside of the scale. To my experiments, I invited both experts for scoring the different pictures from around the world, but also participants, general public. As you can see on these pictures, they were recruited to participate in neuroscience studies, and I was then asking their brains for scoring the landscapes. They were conducted in Portugal and in Singapore. They used two neuroscience measurement devices, electroencephalography and functional near-infrared spectroscopy, that are measuring a little bit different activities, different biological mechanisms in the brain. We were also collecting the self-reports such as mood, preference, the depression, severity, as well as different environmental confounding factors measures. Throughout all the experiments, there were healthy but also patients involved, and there are also quite interesting findings for patients. However, the book is directed mostly to the public around green spaces design in the city, so we are focusing on the general population and adults, and also we were conducting the research in the lab, but also outdoors. There are different pros and cons for each of the settings, just because of research design of the experiment issues. So here, for example, we can see the lab-based experiment where the brain activity patterns are collected from this participant that is passively exposed to the video. And here, the participant is exposed to the real landscape settings, the setting of the same green space as before in the lab. And so we could also investigate whether there is a difference between the perception of the real space versus videos and representations, virtual representations of the landscapes and space in general. So that's also, those findings are in the papers, but also translated to more lay person language in the book. So a few words now about the structure of the book. The book consists of 3 parts. Here are actually some illustrations done by Radha Waikul that should be here today as well at this meeting. So part 1 is a scientific part where I explain all the background, scientific background, and what designers should know about neuroscience. I encourage a little bit here to check out the scientific papers as well. I discuss all the possible mechanisms of therapeutic values delivery by spaces and design, and also I elaborate on the brain response to contemplative landscapes and what contemplative landscapes actually mean and why it is important to try to incorporate some of these findings in the practice. I also talk about other aspects to unlock the potential of the healing of the space that are not exactly in the designer's hands, such as who can benefit the most from these spaces, or what activities these people have to do in the park in order to unlock the healing potential, and how much time and how frequently they should experience these places to unlock any benefits. The second part of the book is more practical, because I dwell more in detail about each of the 7 key components of the contemplative landscapes. So behind each of them, so there is a whole chapter about each and every one of them, explaining their psychological background and why they are important, also basing it on scientific findings, and also how to create and what are the most like easy way to establish and introduce these aspects to the design. And also a lot of examples, a lot of case examples are there. Part 3 of the book are the case examples of the contemplative spaces around the world. Here I wanted to cover different continents and different city morphologies and different scales. So we've got here very small pocket parks, large city parks. We have historic gardens, traditional gardens with contemplative features. We've got here some memorial places, a more peri-urban context, as well as even indoor contemplative landscapes. Each of the case studies comes with master plans and drawings, and a lot of pictures as well. And the next part of the book is a very hands-on, step-by-step user's manual for the contemplative landscape model. It explains how to use it for evaluation of the existing landscapes, how to score them, and also how to score the projects, the visualizations of the prospective constructions, interventions, step by step, but also how to use it for design. And finally, the final chapter is the vision for the future mentally healthy city, and the approaches that are taken right now to try to incorporate the knowledge from science and bring them to design. And there are some examples from around the world. And at the end, there is the contemplative landscape model in the printable version for everyone to use. And it's also available online, free of charge, so you don't have to buy a book to have that tool, to use the tool. It's actually part of most of the papers that I have published to date. So that's it about the book and about my research. I hope this will stimulate the discussion, and I'm really looking forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Agnieszka. Well, there have been a number of questions that have come through in chat already. Well, Darren wrote, if most urban parks are falling below the 4.6 score to provide, falling below the 4.6 score to provide mental health benefits, have you identified what the major factor is that is preventing them from scoring over 4.6? I'm guessing that as most urban parks are still largely mown grass and therefore much lower in biodiversity than the equivalent natural landscape, this is the major reason.
It's for sure one of the reasons. I think the main problem why they are not scoring higher is that the visual quality of the single scenes that are presenting, that are manifesting to the users while they travel through the park, they are not considered by the designer. Maybe designers are more focused on creating master plans and meeting functions, meeting the budgets, and a lot of different things they have to be providing with their designs. But the visual quality analysis and the analysis of the single scenes are not the first priority.
Well, rather than talking about the process by which a park is created, so this is a legacy of, I know a lot of urban areas in England, there's a legacy of parks that were created prior to 1930, and they are, as Darren says, mostly mown grass. There's quite a famous example in southeast London called Sutcliffe Park. It was part of a flood defence scheme to prevent flooding in Lewisham, part of the River Ravensbourne and Quaggy catchment. It was an area of flat mown glass. It was re-landscaped. The River Quaggy that went through it, a brook, was deculverted, daylighted, wetlands were created, and the landscape was made more diverse. The net result was double the number of people coming to the park, staying for twice the amount of time. So I think probably the question that Darren would like to ask is what features, if you're starting with a park, an existing park that is just mown grass, what should be done to improve the contemplative value or the value to society or mental health? What design features would you recommend putting in?
So all those 7 here, so they probably have to find their place in the design. So for example, the long distance views are very powerful. So whether we can see the fore, middle, and background and switch between them is very important. Then placement of archetypal elements so that they are dominating and triggering an eye of the observer is very important as well. These archetypal elements can be different. I list them all. For example, water pond, a still water mirror that reflects the sky or the old tree or the rock. They are powerful elements. When they are designed in the right way, they will trigger attention. They will be orientation points, but also they will elicit subconscious response in our brain. And then about the biodiversity, there is a thin line between wilderness and biophilia, and then biophobia, and what makes us scared when there is too much wilderness and we don't feel safe. So this is all also about harmonizing it and balancing out how many species we are bringing in. And I'm talking also about animal species, different insects, bees, and like a lot of different things that we can bring to the landscape so that it functions. So it should be lively and dynamic. The dynamic elements are extremely important to make us feel that we are in the place that's alive and make us think that we are part of it. So we are part of this collective living family. But there can't be too much, obviously. So there can be many different issues with that space. Each space should be addressed. Site specificity in mind.
Thank you very much. And if anybody wants to conjure up any more design questions, do think about them while we ask Faith Crompton. Can you unmute yourself? This is a very strange phenomenon because there are no settings that we can control. You've managed it.
Hello, yes. Sorry,
Right.
managed to do it
Over to
on
you.
screen. Hello. I was just wondering, did you look at active interaction with the space? Like people who go out there with an intention to do an activity in order to calm down, to be more meditative, such as creating art, writing, maybe taking photographs, practicing Tai Chi, Qigong, or forest bathing?
No, my answer would be very short, no. And it's because the neuroscience experiments would not be reliable if the participants are moving. So far, the technology is developing, but so far the signal harvested from a moving participant, especially moving outdoors, it will be extremely contaminated, and therefore it's difficult to analyze it. Okay. So yeah, I think still for the planners, designers, it's quite important to operate what's there in the space, and start from there before we start advising or promoting certain activities. So still quite a lot to work with, and a lot of future research has to be done as well with this in mind. Like, that's very important too. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Emma McMullen, are you able to turn your microphone on, and then followed by Lynn Melvin?
Yes, I am.
Well done.
So my question actually is, because I just quickly typed it out, but I'd like to extend that to disabled peoples, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So it's whether you looked at the neurological disabilities like neurodiversity and learning disabilities as a particular group, and whether you found that there was any impact on them. And I say this because I have a friend who has a son who is very, very severely disabled, learning disability, and he can't navigate the urban realm. He can't walk in the high street, but he can walk in the woods, and he can walk on the beach, which is I've always found fascinating. Yeah.
That's absolutely incredible. It's
I
great.
know.
I've never heard.
Because his type of learning disability means that he every day is a completely new brain. You know, he has to learn everything from the beginning. So when he goes into a street in the town, everything is new. So he has to touch everything. He has to touch the pavement, he has to touch the lamppost, he has to touch the brick buildings, and it takes, you know, an hour to get 20 yards because everything is brand new and must be experienced in that way. He doesn't have that in the woods or on the beach. He's just able to walk.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, that prompts some new research ideas, definitely. But I didn't research on any particular disability groups except for depressed patients with clinically diagnosed depression. But I know studies from other researchers who did I don't remember in particular the same case as you described, but each group should be studied and addressed separately because it's not there can be some surprises with that. For example, some studies show that forest bathing, as it's now very big, growing in popularity, it might not be good for all people. Some elderly participants of the experiments showed anxiety while going through the virtual forest and also the real forest. It also depends on the design of the forest and what sort of forest it is. Not all forests are for all people. Also, the autistic children that were examined in one, I suppose, Australian study, they showed some sort of learning disability right after visiting the forest setting. So it is definitely important to research on different groups separately, and I hope that we will have enough knowledge and enough evidence soon to craft some sort of personalized interventions that will be dedicated to different groups and different disorders, such as we have medications and pill for different diseases. We will have landscapes and healing therapeutic spaces for different diseases one day.
I had read ages ago that there was some evidence to show that people with autism that lived in greened environments experienced fewer symptoms, but that I can't tell you where I read that. It was such a long time ago. I read it,
It also it probably depends on the quality of the spaces, because forest and just the archetype of forest is it's a place full of elements, full of tall vertical structures that can be overwhelming for some. We are on the depth of the forest, on the bottom, so we are kind of maybe lost between those elements, and maybe there's just too many elements. While beach landscapes or open lawn or meadow landscapes can be more favorable for some.
Thank you very much, Emma.
Thank you.
You raised a very interesting line of thought there, and I'll be pasting a link at the end that may be of further interest. Perhaps three final questions from Lynn Melvin, Raneem Allah, and Hannah Griffin in succession, and then we'll probably wrap things up, if that's okay. So, Lynn, would you like to?
I'm a bit worried about the amount of background noise I've got here at the moment. So, but my question was, if I can scroll up and go to it. Right. Okay. So I was wondering, Agnieszka, how much young adults had been included in your research because of their sort of dependence on virtual reality, almost to the point where they don't miss green spaces because they think they've got them in a virtual world. And I wondered if young adults were included in your mental health statistics.
Thank you for that question. Actually, my studies, due to the ethics requirements, were recruiting only adults above 21 years old, so still very young students, but nothing below that age. There is, however, a lot of interesting studies that I quote about the adolescents and children. And I definitely can say that the children and adolescents are the first groups that can benefit the most from the contact with nature in general, and specifically contemplative landscapes. It is definitely a problem that adolescents are now, their attention span is much shorter than it used to be, and they are becoming bored very easily, very quickly. But at the same time, what's very interesting is that in that age, the amount of time spent in solitude, the need for the solitude and pondering and contemplating and reflecting on life and its purpose, it's actually highest as compared to other age groups. So when given the opportunity and when encouraged, the adolescents are actually showed in other studies, they showed interest and being able to contemplate and relax in nature and find the peace of mind rather than just scrolling. And there are even interesting studies in the university campus in California, where they created that contemplative center for students where there is any network, there is no Wi-Fi, and they have to leave their phones outside. And they actually go there and they actually appreciate having that space in their campus.
Thank you. And now Raneem, hello.
Okay, hello. I have some questions regarding the experiment that you have done, Aga. during the experiment, have you considered the time exposure for, different values? I mean, when they are exposed to different or various settings of landscape, or contemplative or non-contemplative, do you consider the time exposure? Or you just set one value, one period of time for all the participants?
Yeah, so they had to be comparable, so there had to be set time, and we tried to balance out so that it's not too short, so like we are able to capture the brain changes occurring, but also it couldn't be too long so that the participant doesn't get tired or falls asleep. So it was quite a difficult decision, but we established 1 minute per each setting. And when the experiment was taking place in one park with multiple landscape scenes to go around to, we tried to keep the all recording time beyond below 10 minutes.
Okay.
I hope it answers your question.
Yes, exactly. But do you think that you will have some different values if you extended the time exposure? And
yeah, for sure that we would be dealing with so-called habituation bias, or some tiredness from wearing the headset, like neuroscience equipment on head, and that wouldn't be what we are looking for.
Okay. One another question. Is there any required mental status for the participants? I mean,
you mean exclusion criteria?
Yes. Okay. For example, ADHD,
yes.
autism, maybe.
Yes, there were several exclusion and inclusion criteria. For example, all participants that are left-handed were excluded just because of comparability. If someone is left-handed, then the brain is like the activity of the hemispheres is switched, and it's more difficult to analyze the data together with right-handed people. And because there is in general more right-handedness in the population, we just decided on right-handedness. The participants in the healthy group, of course, they had to be a certain age, didn't report any mental health issues, and had a good night's sleep.
Okay. One last question.
Yes.
From your point of view, how can we generalize this process? I mean, brainwaves recording are costly in time and also in economic wise. So I'm feeling that I'm going into war to tell them that we need to do this, but no one, listened to me. So how can we generalize this process? Or
I think it takes a lot of time to convince decision makers, if this is what you mean, to convince politicians, to convince public bodies to basically decide to prioritize mental health and well-being and apply the findings of studies in their policies. It's a work in progress, and it demands a lot of studies to be done, concluded, replicated, and then the scientific consensus established about some things, and probably after some time, this scientific consensus will infiltrate into the public realm. But it definitely takes years to do so. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure. Thanks for questions.
And last question from Hannah Griffin about the multi-sensory dimension of green space.
Oh, hi. Really interesting talk. Thank you. Yeah, I just wondered, I know it sounds like your primary research was sort of focused on contemplating a view, but I wondered particularly within the sort of meta-analysis, what consideration and sort of research has been done about kind of multisensory and immersive experiences in nature, particularly actually thinking about children and play, you know, paddling, climbing trees, all of those kind of things, like the way that children would sort of naturally want to interact with a landscape.
Yeah, there is a lot of research done about multisensory experiences and specifically for children, but also adults. For adults is also important because we don't get to use all the senses outdoors. And natural landscapes are stimulating the use of all senses. But yeah, the bottom line of this research, of what I know, is that the more senses are involved, the better. And children should, and adults, we should use all our senses on the daily basis, not just vision to watch the screens or hear the audio, but also sense of smell and sense of touch every day and with different stimulations. So that's the shortest answer I can give, but there is definitely a lot of research about that.
Okay, great.
Well, thank you very much, Agnieszka, for the presentation and for answering the questions posed so ably.
Thank you.
I did say I would mention something about another aspect of neuroscience. We had a lecture from Professor Kate Jeffrey on the neuroscience of navigation, and it's on the Urban Nouse channel on YouTube. There are two. There's a short one of 7 minutes and a long one of about an hour. She talks about mammals having place cells, which in the brain, which allow them to recognize places, grid cells, which is a sort of triangular point map that we use to navigate, head direction cells that fire up when we recognize something in the landscape, a landmark, essentially, and the retrosplenial cortex. And I haven't a clue what that's meant to do, but if you listen to her talk, you'll be able to find out. And never design anything that doesn't have a landmark ever again, because you know the importance of head direction cells. So it's just down to me to say thank you, everybody, for turning up to the talk today, and a special thanks to Agnieszka for giving us such a thought-provoking talk.
Thank you very much for the invitation and very inspiring discussions. I'm reading through all the questions now. I hope you can reach out to me by email or LinkedIn if anyone has questions. Thank you very much.